welcome everybody. Welcome to this next installment of Cyber Shaman. I have today's special guest, Mr. David Silverman, and he has something really important to share with us regarding his spiritual practice and work that he does with people. And so, David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in this way of living and servicing other people?
Yeah, absolutely. So the short version of the story, it doesn't go down the rabbit hole of my stuff, is that spirituality saved my life, right? When I was a child, I was 13 years old. My family exploded and fell apart, and everything went wrong. And spirituality was there for me as a tool for self-investigation and self-understanding. It brought out for me the experience of being connected to what was real when at a time period where nothing felt real. And through the incredible grace of spirit, like sending me teachers and healers and guides, by the time I left high school, instead of being an absolutely neurotic mess who, could have easily been a danger to himself or others, I was well adjusted and fairly happy, and was set on a path of self-investigation and self-understanding that has defined my whole life. And what I've come to understand is that this is true for what hopefully can be true for everybody, but it's true for everybody I've ever met, that all of us can find our own healing and our own spiritual freedom through this kind of work, through going inside and looking into ourselves as the path to our own liberation.
Kind of like your own guru, becoming your own guru.
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly that, like step by step. And discovering that the way out is in, as a teacher of mine said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I resonate with that. And what modalities did you get exposed to at that young age?
When I was young, I did a kind of work that's it's not actually Palladian light work, but it was related to the lady who channeled Palladian light work, taught my teacher before she created Palladian light work. So it's kind of like a branch from that work, for people who aren't deeply connected to Mount Shasta. The kind of work that I was doing is a form of auto hypnosis, where basically I would go into trance and invoke spiritual guides with the guidance of my teacher, and we would go into my inner world and find past lives, belief systems, and emotional barriers that were wrapping me up, that were absorbing my time, energy, and attention. And we would also do psychic surgeries to remove what she called ET devices, right? Extraterrestrial devices, which sounds very fantastical, right? Like it's, but really it's just spiritual mechanisms that we take on that come from an energy that doesn't resonate with Earth, right? It's not, you don't have to think of little gray men, right? Like,
right.
But it's just like, there's an energy that's not resonant with Earth. It comes from somewhere else, and you take it on so that you can do something that's maybe not actually natural for this place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What seems even more interesting is that you were interested in and feel comfortable doing this at such a young age. Can you expand a little bit on, like, how was it that you were able to even entertain going into this at that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. So it was 50% like soul wisdom of this is what you're doing, and 50% it was introduced to me in a grounded way. Right. It wasn't introduced to me through somebody's neurosis of like, I believe in all the fantastical, blah, 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 like whatever, it didn't come from the vibration of somebody's craziness. It came from the vibration of this is real. And, for me, I suppose you could say the proof was in the pudding, right? Like it wasn't really about, is this real? It's about every time I do this work, I get better. Right.
Wow.
Right. So like, at first, I was 13 years old and super traumatized, and this lady offers me healing. And then, she's a super, super open medium and really grounded. So she'd be in trance and she'd be telling me things about my life, the dreams I was having, and the people in my life. And some of it, sure, I was a kid, right? Like some of it was my own, this is fantastic. I like being involved with this, to some degree, it's like my desire for like drama, right? It's like I really want to be involved with like a story of something's happening, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of the emotional draw, right? Is like the unconscious self was like, this is really interesting,
Right.
But it was, I think a lot of it was as simple as I would do the work, I would feel better. I would do the work, I would feel better. And eventually, you get grounded in it, right? You go like, oh, okay, I can see how those pieces of what I was doing were probably my own fantasies. Those pieces made sense. But we would go in and she would name belief systems I didn't necessarily even know I had, but then they would heal and I would get better and I would feel cleaner. And I would feel more available and more awake and alive. And, first couple of years, I'm just doing it because it seemed like a thing to do and it was free, right? And I felt better, but I wouldn't say I was like, oh my God, my whole life changed, like I was 15. I don't know what that means, right? Right. But by the time I was 17, 18, 19 years old, by that time, I was significantly shifted. And I could tell, I was looking at myself and I'm like, man, I'm way more self-aware than anybody around me, right? Like, they're all kids and they're not doing work. So like, I've become very deeply aware of all these patterns in me and like why I'm motivated by the things I'm motivated by and why I do what I do. And, learning those things over time made it really evident. It's like, oh, this is real, right? And some of the things that she told me in channeling that, when I was like 14, 15 years old, I was like, I remember she said that, but I don't know anything about it. And then in the last 5-10 years, it's come true. It's like, boom, this is what's up. Like she told me when I was 13, 14 years old, she said, a lot of what you're experiencing right now is a longing to be who you're going to be when you're 35. And sure enough, when I was 35, here I was in my spiritual practice and I'm singing and dancing and I'm like, this is who I wanted to be. This, like, literally, I can feel this was who I was wanting to be.
Wow.
You could feel that 20 years ago. Right.
Right. So share with us a little bit how that transition happened, because from 13 to 35,
yeah,
that's quite a bit of time.
Yeah, it didn't happen overnight. It was just by doing the work continually over and over and over, and refining yourself, like forging yourself, right? Like one hammer strike at a time. Like, oh, and I clean out this illusion I'm carrying, and I clean out these pains that I've been holding on to, and step by step. And then sure enough, I ended up becoming a man who I love, who I admire. Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sounds good.
I recommend it.
How did it kind of blossom though? I mean, because I know things don't always happen easily.
Oh my God.
And it's usually a lot of stuff that comes up. And how did that evolve?
For me, spiritual, like growing up in Ashland, Oregon, living a spiritual life from the time I was a kid, I was surrounded by spiritual people after high school. And after I was like limited to like high school people, I started being involved with workshops and groups of people, which are mostly people who are 15 years older than me. Right. It's like mostly 35 and up. And I was easily the youngest person in almost every workshop I attended, every group I was a part of. And, you know, after 5 to 10 years of this, you start to notice patterns of like how people work and how people function and why they get involved and why they stay and why they don't. And what I came to learn, because I could tell after some time that I was further along the path than most of these people who were much older than me. And what I came to understand pretty quickly was that the difference was that I was doing the work to heal and transform myself and to face my shadows, to face and really look at the things in me that were not pretty, right? The thoughts and feelings that I harbored, that I carried, that were, you know, separating me from my own heart, my love, separating me from other people, right? That had ill will towards other people. And by continually sort of mercilessly looking at those things in me, right, just like constantly shining a light on those things in me, I was able to keep doing that work and forging myself, right? And so for me, the essence of spiritual practice, the essence of shamanic practice is about looking at the dirt, right? Looking about the muck of our lives, looking at, like, you know, the things. And, you know, I could also stand to be kinder to myself. That's part of the muck, right?
Sure. But looking at yourself versus, you know, trying to change the outside world or an outside
Right.
relationship, that
Exactly.
the focus is on you. And if you get triggered, that's because of you getting triggered, not somebody doing something to you.
Precisely.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, there's a lot of layers to spiritual growth. There's a lot of steps in development, right? And some of the key aspects of finding your own power, right, like finding your own center, is never being a victim in your own mind, right? Just being like, no matter what happens to me, no matter how horrible, you know, somebody treats me, no matter what kind of thing I experience, not giving your power away to the other person or to that experience. And, you know, I want to be gentle when I say this, because it's easy when you're not in the middle of it to be like, don't give your power away. But it's like, okay, but, you know, people go through some stuff, right? You know, because I'm not just talking about like, oh, you know, like he said a nasty word. It's like, no, people get, you know, injured and assaulted and raped, and, you know, like they go through horrible things. They get hit by cars and they go, you know, get into war zones and all these kinds of things. And all of that's very, very real, right? And there's a time period when you're healing and recovering from a great trauma that it's not useful to be like, you know, you don't want to tell a victim it's your fault, right? You know, like this is not a useful moment. But in the process of healing from any trauma, you have to come to the place of like taking your power back from it, right? And not being like, she did that to me, he did that to me, you know, like not blaming other, and instead looking at yourself and saying, what were the pieces of my contribution to this? And being honest about it, right? Like, what are the things that I could have done differently? Because, you know, when people hear that, they think, oh my God, I've got to be ashamed. I've got to feel terrible about my life and about, you know, what happened to me. And it's like, you know, I'll use the gratuitous example because everybody will be able to associate with it pretty easily. It's like, you know, the simple one is victim blaming women for dressing too sexy, right? You know, like, it's like, that's don't do that, right? You know, like, right. But there's the political piece, right? Is like, which we shouldn't put that on women, that they have to dress a certain way to manage men's emotions. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's the group system, that's the political landscape, and that's all true. Is like, we shouldn't do that. And then for the individual's power and empowerment, you have to own the ways that you contribute to creating your own life, right? It's like, okay, but I did put myself in a situation where this was a possibility. And then the key isn't to then be like, oh, fuck, it's my fault, right? That's not it, right? The key is to go, okay, I did that. Now, would I do it again? Would I die on that hill? Right. Because if I would die on that hill, I didn't do anything wrong. Right. I made that choice. And now you have your power. Now you're empowered. Right. Oh, I chose to wear that mini skirt and I would fucking do it again because I look great. Right. Now you have your power. Right.
Yeah, I think taking responsibility, yes, it is difficult. And sure, we have to be gentle in the beginning, when we're in the first stages of healing. But yes, I do agree. And I think you would find that in other teachings that have a value, that ultimately the more you take responsibility is the more that you're able to take your power back. So
Precisely.
So go ahead.
It to me, it's as simple as it's like, look, would Jesus choose to die on that cross again? Right. Like I suspect he would, because he did so with love. Right. And that's the ticket is I would choose to do this again. Right. And if the answer is no, then you have work to do. Oh, I need to ask myself about that, and not about controlling the outcome. You can't control the outcome ever. Right. You have no control about what other people do, but given the circumstances that you had like you were informed of, you knew it was going to be like this. I would choose to do that again. And if not, then you go, gosh, okay, I learned something. And then both ways you have your power and you're not a victim in either circumstance. Is a huge aspect of spiritual development, right? Is a huge, and there's more levels. It goes further than that, but like, it's a huge piece to being like, I'm not a victim and I create my life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it has to come out of love, whether you would do it again or not.
Exactly.
Well, would you do it? If you wouldn't do it, would it be because of love? But if you would do it, would it be because of love? I mean, that's
And for me, it's about love. I just want to own this. Is like, I'm a person who believes in the spiritual direction of love, right? Like, I believe that love as a vibration is the key to all things, right? For me, that's spiritual development. I want to honor, though, that for not like other people have different ideas of what love means, and they don't necessarily associate spiritual development with love. And so I want to honor that, like, even for the people whose spiritual direction is not yet about love, that all forms of spiritual development, learning, and growth start in most ways with power, right? Like with the owning of your own power. And so for the folks who are, I don't want to frame it exclusively as like, you're all going to learn my way is the best way eventually, like, I don't want to frame it like that, but like, for the people whose spiritual path and the steps that they are on largely revolve around finding their own empowerment, finding their own boundaries, finding their own steps, that this is an essential piece, right? Is I'm here doing this, learning to not be a victim in my own mind.
Yeah, I think that it starts there, because I don't think anybody can victimize you unless you have that door open with yourself.
Exactly. Right. And it's not easy, right? Like, it sounds hard, and it's harder than that. Right.
Yeah, no, spiritual work, I think it only starts and when it gets hard.
Right.
Yeah. The rest of it is just hopeful planning and hopeful daydreaming. But it's not until the tears hit the pen and paper that you're writing on, that's actually when it starts.
Totally.
The preamble is needed, though. I mean, we need to, bring ourselves to that, but it takes work.
Yeah. And it's not about the suffering of it. It's about getting in touch with the things in you that have been suffering and you haven't been connecting to them. Right.
Right. Your interpretation, how you're telling that story of that event.
Yeah. And for me, to bring it back to how we started with this, that was the essence of what kept me feeling connected to spiritual work, and where the evolution of it always kept me is in diving into that raw, real experience. The place that kept me, open-hearted enough to cry, and to keep totally in touch with my emotions as a man, and to to be in touch with the thoughts I was really having, not the ones that I censor for being a person in the world. Facing, for me personally, my journey, my karma largely has revolved around sexuality and relationships. And, a lot of my work was facing the pieces of me that weren't pretty around that, the ways that I had negative intentions towards people, the way that I had, fears or anxieties that prevented me from showing up in a good way as a man, like all that kind of stuff. Right. Over and over and over and over. Right.
So how do you paint the picture of, like, how do you coalesce all of these teachings to how you work with people now?
A lot of it is, for me, it's a process of applying the wisdom and lessons that I've learned into the person's process. The people come, I do this work with a healing form of breath work, and they come, they do all this transformation, and usually there's stuff that all this emotional material gets moved and transformed, and my spiritual guides work through me and clean their aura, and then they have thoughts, and they come to me with, it's like, this is what's on my mind, this is what's going on for me, and then I help them be kinder about their own experience to each other, to other people in their lives, to themselves, to forgive themselves, right, for wherever they're at and whatever they're doing.
So that is how you begin the process of working with people, is through the breath work?
Generally, yes. Yeah.
How it initially started?
It depends. Usually what I do is people come to me, and then I talk to them for 15 to 20 minutes to get a sense of what's going on in them. Right. And it's sort of a diagnostic. And then, sometimes I listen to my spiritual guides, right? Sometimes my guides are like, all right, get them on the table. And sometimes they're like, they need coaching, right? Like they need to talk some stuff out and have somebody direct them, right? Sometimes I do channeling, right? And I've done, I call it psychic surgery in my own head, but the psychic surgery is like a thing elsewhere, so I don't want to confuse people that it's like a thing. But sometimes I go in and I do work in their inner world, very similar to what I did with my first teacher, right? We'd go into an auto-hypnotic state, and we go into their inner belief systems and work through things and things like that.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like it's definitely needed. More people need to hear about that, I think, because some people are living more in this energy world of theirs. Not everybody is an athlete. Not everybody lives, in that sort of physicalness. Some people do have other experiences of other dimensions of life that, more etheric. Yeah, I have heard of psychic surgery being done, and it sounds fascinating, but I'm sure it's probably more work than that. Can you explain a little bit more about how, what are the processes, what happens when you're doing psychic surgery?
My experience of it is that my spiritual guides come in. Sometimes I feel them guiding me. Sometimes that I incorporate them. And they show me what's going on in somebody's aura and in their energy field, their energy bodies. And they'll show me a pattern and what needs to happen with the pattern. So they'll show me like, oh, this chakra is blocked because there's this thing here, and they've got a machine operating this way, or they've got emotions or a child self that needs help here, or something like this. And then I'm directed to go in, and I have crystals that I work with, and I go in with my hands to their aura, and I rearrange things so that their own energy can flow better, and the light can come into their spiritual light can enter into their body.
Mm-hmm. And enter the whole system, their
Yep.
energetic system. And can I say that it's kind of like being having an upload of how your system works? I mean, is that the computer analogy? Does it fit here?
Sometimes, but it can be a little more dynamic than that too, right? The reason I call it psychic surgery is because it has a lot of similarities to surgery, right? It can be very intense, and people are often exhausted by the process, right? Like, and they can be in a kind of spiritual state of recovery for some time afterwards, depending on the intensity of the surgery. Right? Like, like sometimes when I do really heavy stuff, it's like they're like kind of down and out for like a week, and then most of the time it's not like that. Most of the time it's more like going to the dermatologist, right? Where it's like, yeah, I'm just uncomfortable, but it's tiring, but not intensely deep. But yeah, you're updating your computer to some degree, but it's more than just your thoughts. It affects your feelings. It affects your physicality too.
So it really gets into the hard drive of who you are.
Yeah,
it's not just.
And it's in the universe of psychic surgeons, I know that very, very intensely powerful mediums. I have heard the stories, though I've never experienced it myself, of these people being capable of not only affecting the aura and the inner worlds in that way, but being able to affect the physical body with their psychic capacities. And I am not at that level. I'm not like John of God. I don't have those capacities. So I don't know what's going on with him these days, but I was never, I don't have that. I call it that because I think that particularly for people who don't, like they're not deeply in the psychic medium world, calling it surgery helps them take it seriously.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Are there any stories that you might be able to share with us?
Narrow down.
working with people, and like having something that was really like a phenomenal experience, or something that was incredibly challenging, or
yeah. I'll share a story from a long time ago. The one of my early experiences that was super beautiful and inspiring for me in my own growth was I was working for a woman who was living with chronic fatigue, right? And like not like cutesy chronic fatigue where she's tired sometimes, but like she'd have days where she was in bed for 6 hours because she couldn't get out of bed and she couldn't do anything. And I did a psychic surgery for her that was like, it was draining this energy from her spleen, right? Like she had this kind of blue-gray gunk, like, and I did this draining for her. And for the first time in years, she had a day where she was completely and fully active, and she was just able to just go. Right. And I didn't like go in being like, I'm going to cure your chronic fatigue. I went in and that was what I was directed to do. And it happened. And I saw the reason. I even shared with her the reasons for that chronic fatigue. And she didn't really listen, and she didn't really stay better. But, but for a moment, like it happened, and it worked. It was real. Right.
Yeah. No. And I guess, yeah, sometimes it does work out that way for some people, right? I mean,
and it's true for real surgery too, right? Like, oh, I got a hip replacement, and then I kept doing the thing the doctor told me not to do, and then surprise, the hip doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. that's just the way life goes sometimes.
Right. You know,
That also shows the, the responsibility that everybody has. It's like you didn't take her power away.
exactly.
You reconnected her to her own power, but even then, we all have free will, and whether we decide to integrate something helpful or not, maybe
Yeah.
it's not time yet, right?
No, exactly. It's like I am not your savior. I can't do that. Right. Like, and teacher of mine said, if you pick somebody up out of a hole before they're ready to get out of the hole, they're just going to find another hole.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a spiritual truth.
Yeah. And it's important, particularly for those who are healers, those who are empathic, those who identify as caring for others. Right. Is that it's important for us to let go of our own attachment to people getting better so that we can be in service to the way they actually get better. Right.
Yeah, I think that's very beautiful. Yeah, I agree. I think that keeps everything happy and healthy for everybody involved.
Exactly. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's what, no matter what you do, you always find that's the truth at the end of the day. Right. The truth at the end of the day is that nobody helps nobody. Right. And I do the work to make you available to the light, and then you do with it what you will. Right. But
yeah, that is the treasure. Because even people who, like yourself, and you still have to do your own work, right?
absolutely.
And so helping others doesn't negate you doing your work probably even more fervently than everybody.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, it's being a healer, if you're doing it correctly, is always about, refining and cleaning yourself so that you can be more available in your own heart and in your own love to care for others, but to also continually clean off your own attachments to those people so that you can be of service. Right.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Right. Because we're human. When we it's not like when I say that I love people that I'm like pulling punches on that. I was like, no, I really love these people. And, the more time you work for somebody, the more you can't help but just be like, of course I love you. Right. I get to take care of you. Why wouldn't I love you? Right.
Yes. But again, there is nothing more than your own personal work, and that's something, again, that's not my own. It's something that's shared through many spiritual practices that I think liberates you as an individual, as a healer, because you don't have to be the God for anybody.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I also I recently heard this saying that says, like, people sometimes ask, like, what do I do, right here, right now? I mean, because most people, when they come, they want help now. And the saying goes, you do what you can, the best you can in the now, without attachment, without expectation.
Yeah.
And I think that liberates and cleans the environment for everybody, that is participating in this endeavor.
Spirit respects effort. Right. Like spirit respects effort. But the more humility that you manifest in your effort, the more real that effort is. Right. People, when I say people, I'm really thinking myself, who, when you make strong efforts towards a thing, but your ego is driving it, right? That there's a kind of spoiled brat mentality. Right? Like, it's like, I did all this work. Why didn't God give me my toy? Right? Like, and
Yeah.
it's the when we make the genuine effort to surrender, the genuine effort to sacrifice towards our healing, towards our own growth, towards our own humility. That's when, in my experience, spirit always catches you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do see that as well. Yeah, it's very it's very exposing yourself. I mean, because sometimes we think we're being upfront with others and even with God.
Yeah.
And sometimes you catch yourself saying a script.
Oh yeah, totally.
And so, yeah, making that surrender, it's an action
Yeah.
oriented surrender.
It's super important. It's super important to recognize that real surrender comes from effort, not weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm surrendering to God as an active verb, not as I'll just let whatever happens to me happen to me. It's not like that.
Mm-hmm. And then doing something with it, which is
exactly like because right, there's you can, in just talking about the story of it, you can tell there's a qualitative difference between the person who surrenders to God, meaning they just let things happen to them, versus the person who surrenders to God, meaning they devote their life to the practice and they allow God into their being. Right? I'm thinking of Saint Francis right now. Right? Like, Saint Francis gave up everything to affirm the divine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is one of the mistakes people make about Saint Francis. They think he just like was a bum. Right? I gave up everything because I wanted to be poor. He didn't want to be poor. He wanted to affirm that God was real because he was rich. Right? Like, he was a rich person.
Right.
And he gave up everything to affirm the existence of God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was an affirmation of abundance, not of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Spiritual poverty. It was an affirmation of spiritual abundance while embracing material poverty as a tool for spiritual abundance.
Mm-hmm. So how do you structure this ethically or spiritually wise, that because when you're dealing with these types of concepts and energies with people, like, how do you maintain the healthy boundary? How do you keep your perspective clear and focused and grounded when somebody could be energetically just not knowing which way is up or which way is down?
It depends on what they're going through, right? It depends on like if they're experiencing like a super ungrounded moment. To me, the key is to always be praying into their connection to their higher self. Right? It's like, I'm here on the side of your soul. I'm here on the side of your heart. I'm here on the side of your higher self. I'm not actually here on the side of your ego. Right? Like, I'm not actually on the side of your personality. Right? I like you, and I don't want, like, I know you need a personality. I'm not going to like try and take it from you. But to me, one of the essential pieces of being a healer is that you're praying into this person arriving at their best self more than staying comfortable. Right? And of course, you pray for their comfort, you hope for their comfort, you like, I want you to be happy, I want you to have the human material comforts of the thing, but even more, I want your spiritual liberation.
So you're almost not really focusing on their earthly self, shall we say, right?
Yeah.
Because you're there focused on their higher self and making sure that that bridge is created with their current earthly self.
Yeah. And you know, I don't do that in a vacuum. I ask my spiritual guides for guidance and help with that all the time, because I'm just a person, right? Like I'm not God. I'm not the authority that knows everything about everything. I'm here doing what I know how to do to connect people in the way I understand to connect. And then it's always with people's consent, right? My necklace is falling apart. You know, you always work with consent in everything that you do, because just as we were talking about a person you know, like being like, I'm not fixing them, I'm empowering them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. I work with the person's prayer. You're praying for this, I will help you get to towards your prayer, right? I help you clarify your prayer. I help you pray into what you do. If somebody made a prayer that was like super negative and is like I would tell them, I don't think I can do that for you, because it's not in my heart, right? I don't want to. I don't, because I think it's bad for you to do that,
Right.
right? But I work inside the other person's prayer, right? They tell me what their prayer is, either directly, I'm praying for this, or their prayer is, man, like my girlfriend left me and I'm just so bummed out, and you know, like I'm just depressed all the time, and then I go, okay, well, what would you like your life to look like? And that's their prayer. Like whatever they, you know, like I want this, I want this, I want that, I want, you know, and then I listen to the prayer the best way I know how to, right? And I ask for their spiritual guides and my spiritual guides to get together and to make a plan for them.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds like it has a bulwark to it, like it has, you know, something that can carry over the waters and not fall into it.
And you know, you said the word ethics, which is, for me, I take ethics into a spiritual realm that actually, for me, goes beyond what most people, you know, when people consider ethics, it's usually from a ideological standpoint, right? Which is fine. It's a way to be on earth. But the ideological standpoint for me is limited. It you know, it inevitably is limited by our ideas of ourselves, and which we just know isn't our whole self. Like we aren't what we think we are, right? We just aren't. We're more than that. And so I'm praying into more than just your ideas of self and what you think you want. I'm praying into what I sense in your heart is your real longing. I'm sensing into what I sense in you is the place where your own love takes over your own life, right? Which is, to me, the key to a grounded higher self.
Mm-hmm. Is that kind of like connecting with your passion?
Kind of, but I would say that, so for me, passion stems from the second chakra. It stems from earthly energies, right? Passion comes from, like, I'm passionate about this thing and I'm passionate to create it. And that energy wells up from the second chakra, right? The place, and it's the second chakra, for people who aren't chakra people, is the place of personal creativity, is the place, the first place in the energy system where your energy goes from belonging to tribe to belonging to you as an individual, right? It's often associated with sexuality because people like sexuality, but it's not actually directly related to just that, because sexuality is both a second and first chakra function. But the place of passion, it's a place that artists draw on, the place that we dance from. It's the place that the wells up, and it's not always about, you know, about interpersonal passions. So I would say that being in the place where your love takes over your life, oftentimes that pathway starts with your passion, right? But there's a kind of evolution where it gets bigger than that, and it takes on a more refined energy.
Could it be that passion is a little bit of a sprinter and connecting beyond passion into more of the divine love is that more kind of like the long distance trek? Because if passion just gets you to maybe starting to open up your heart, and then through guidance and intuition, evolve that small kernel of passion into something more long lasting?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because passion and love are not part of a continuum.
Okay.
Right. Like spirit, like the spiritual vibration of love isn't a extension of passion. Right. It's not the same energy.
Okay.
It's
It's its own
something
thing.
that yeah, exactly. It's not the same thing, because you can take your passions and refine them into all kinds of things, and it doesn't have to be love, and it will not necessarily result in love. Right. Like, taken to its extreme conclusion, it won't necessarily get to a place of love unless you choose to open your heart and choose to take that energy through towards that direction. That's why I talked earlier about I believe in the spiritual direction of love, right? Because love. It's like there's a choice to choose to move towards the vibration of love.
Okay. Yeah, because passion doesn't necessarily care about the person next to you.
Exactly.
Right? Unless it fits the passion. But
Right.
love, in its most purest form, cares about people around you. Okay.
And love is a vibration, right? Love is a vibration that lives in the heart chakra. It lives at the center of the heart chakra, and it has many more qualities than we associate with it, than just the ones that, when people hear love, they usually think of a Hallmark card. Like, they usually think of something that's like, oh, it's so sweet and I love them. But there's love like, oh, I love my girlfriend. And there's love like, like, oh, that's such a beautiful sunset. And then there's the kind of love that sets the world on fire. That's like the kind of love that causes people to change their whole lives, right? That causes nations to rise. Right? There's a kind of love that's like, I believe in this so much, and it means so much to me, to my soul, to my being, to everything that I am, that, I mean, truthfully, that I'll live many lives to pursue it. Right? That it's a kind of passion that goes beyond the human passion, because it lasts even when your body fails. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it inspires you because it's the same energy, right? That kind of love, it's the kind of love that makes you weep, right? And which, weeping is not a passionate event usually in that kind of way, right? It's like, no, like it's the kind of, love, when you don't clean your attachments, is the kind of thing that sends people into grief for years and years and years because they love. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I find that, you're explaining things, and hopefully our audience can, understand that this is something that's available, for on a grander scale, that people can continue to expand their energy, their ability to monitor and
Absolutely.
nurture.
One of the things that's really, really important, and that is part of my message for the whole world, is that this kind of love, this kind of light, is available for everyone. Right? It's available for everyone, and not in a, oh, I hope someday it can happen to me kind of way, but in like, you can earn this. You can make this real for yourself. You can create this light in your own life. Wherever you are, whatever you've got going on, whatever you're suffering with, whatever is happening, it is possible for you to do this for yourself.
Yeah, I think people need to realize that they're the person in the right seat, and
Exactly.
and harnessing that power and the light, and taking ownership of that, and not waiting around for other people to give them the okay, or not waiting for somebody who thinks they're a guru to put their hands on them. Right? It's just
exactly.
I have what I need right here, right now.
Yeah, and when we hear that, particularly as Americans, because America is such an individualistic culture, right? We want to hear, oh, I have everything I need, as a, I don't need anybody else, I can do it myself, right? And that's actually not what I'm trying to say, because that, when I was in high school, I was told by my very white principal that there's a Native American proverb. So this is really well researched, and I'm entirely sure that it's a Native American proverb. That the proverb went, a father was talking to his son, and he said, "Son, I want you to get this apple from this tree, right?" And the apple was too high, right? Like it was like, it was 6 feet off the ground. The son's 3 feet tall. And he tries to run and jump to get it, and he tries to throw a stick at it to knock it down. He can't get it, and he does all these different things. And he says to his dad, "Dad, I can't do it." And he says, "I tried everything that you could, and you did not ask me for help." Right. Part of what we have in this life is each other. It's actually a really important part of what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And the downside of having a guru is that you think that they're responsible for your healing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The upside, it is really nice to have help.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have help and not have to call anybody guru.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think.
Well, and I want to, the reason I say this is because I want to respect that, it's easy, particularly in this time on Earth, unfortunately, to see all the negative gurus, right? The people who put themselves out there and then slip off the path, right? Take advantage of people or harm people, or just inflate their own ego and use others to do so. And when you do have a guide, somebody who is truly there and truly helping you, it's important to also be able to embrace how grateful you are for it. Right. I had that, right? I had gurus in my life, and they were luckily the kinds of gurus who would never call themselves gurus.
So could we call them like mentors? Is that a?
Yeah. Well, the reason I say guru is my experience of having a guru, which was not in the Indian tradition. I really shouldn't use the new term guru, but it'll help people relate to it. Was that there was a time period in my life where the teachers that I had at those moments, I was in a particular kind of spiritual relationship to them. And what it meant was that everything they did, everything they said around me was spiritually charged. And it was a lesson for me. Every word out of their mouth, everything that would happen was something that I could learn from, something that I needed to grow from. And during that time period, I became aware that, one, I was projecting, right? And I knew it. I was like, I can tell that I'm looking and I'm not really seeing them as a person that they are. I'm seeing their guru self, right? And to embrace that process as a shamanic process, or to be like, oh, I'm here to learn something, and the spirit is making this happen. And so during that time period, even they had no idea that I was learning from some of the things that they're doing. Like they're just making an ass of themselves or doing whatever they're doing. And they would do something, and I would get this incredibly beautiful spiritual insight that meant everything to me. Right. And I know that during that time period, had I self-sabotaged and said, oh, this isn't real, or I'm projecting, or I'm making this up, and I'd resisted that process, I would have missed the medicine that I was getting. Right. And then there came a time period with each of those teachers where that process finished, and then they became human. Right. Then the things that they said were not perfect, and were like, they would say something like, the fuck are they saying? But it was like, wow, like a very clear, energetic relationship. And I've actually heard people in Indian traditions with their gurus talk about this. Like, I don't remember, it was like an internet article, but like a guru was saying is like, as a student of a guru, don't lean into the humanness of your guru, lean into the presence of that light, right? And they didn't use those words, but and I have experienced that, and I know the truth of it. Is it's like, oh yeah, like don't get too caught up in their human self, because they're people and they're growing and they're doing their own work, right? But you need to lean into that spiritual guidance process, and then when it's done, let it go, because it'll end.
Yeah, that I think that could be useful to me, especially I mean, if you see somebody that can be stepping into your life for a period of time,
right,
and then they could just move on, or you could just move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when we meet people who are genuinely more spiritually open than we are, and not just like they've got some openness to them, but like through and through, they are more open than we are. There's a vibrational thing that happens, which is that our thoughts will like our ego reaction, our vibrational reaction will force us to do one of three things. Either we will run away, and we can do that either by literally leaving the room, or by in our mind being like, this person's a jerk, or like this person has nothing to say, or this person's crazy, or this person's, they're an egomaniac, or they're the whatever, like that's us running away. And doing the third step I'll get to, we can open up to what they're saying and doing, right? We can be present with this vibration that we're experiencing coming from them. Or the third is we can crucify them. Right? Those are the three options we have, because the ego, when it encounters a vibration that is genuinely more open than it is capable of experiencing, it has to do one of those things. Right. And actually, the best example of this isn't with a guru. The best example is with little babies, because little babies are super open. Right. They have big open hearts, and they're just shining light all the time. And that's why some people, most of all of us, have that instinct. It's like, oh, I got to something, I just eat you. Right. It's a tiny version of the same thing. Right. It's the ego being like, I have to destroy this thing that is forcing me open. Right. And I mean, I don't want to like I got kids. I felt that. I feel like it's playful and fun, but there's a little piece, if you examine it really closely, like, wait a minute, there's a piece of that that's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, David, I would like to have you share your information about, where can people contact you, where they can work with you.
Yeah. I'm going to have I don't have my link tree set up yet, but I have, my website is crystalrosebreathing.com. And they can contact it at my email, which is Xenodeus, or XENODEUS @gmail.com. Just for, if they're looking for spiritual guidance or spiritual healing, I'm absolutely shining my light out for anybody who feels called to my work. And
obviously, this is something you can do long distance with people, right? They don't have to be there with you.
I do in-person works, and I do workshops, and I do long distance healings. In the same spirit of the first healings that were done for me, I can do the work I do over the phone, and it's actually very powerful work to do over the phone, because it allows the person to be in their own inner world and in their own inner space while they receive the work. Because in the physical plane, distance matters, but in the spiritual world, actually, distance not so much a thing.
Yeah, indeed. Thankfully so. Well, David, it's been a pleasure hearing more about you and your story, and how and why you do the things that you do with people, and obviously with yourself as well. Thank you so much for spending your time here with us.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I look forward to talking to you again.
Let's do it soon. Take care, bro.
Thank you. Bye-bye.